February 15, 1944, the North Pacific Ocean. A precise point in an endless blue expanse. 10 degrees, 23 minutes north. 150 degrees, 23 minutes east. Here, 150 nautical miles from the fortress of Truk Atoll, the fleet submarine USS Aspro cut through the surface at 12 knots. The morning was brilliant, almost cruelly so. A light wind barely disturbed the long, rolling swells. Visibility stretched for 15 miles, a perfect day for a hunter to see its prey. A perfect day for a hunter to be seen. For 1 month, the Aspro had prowled these waters. 1 month of simmering frustration. She carried 24 Mark 14 torpedoes and provisions for 70 days. A lethal predator sent to sow chaos ahead of Operation Hailstone, the ambitious American plan to shatter the Japanese fleet at Truk. Her mission: to intercept fleeing warships and bleed the enemy's supply lines. But the ocean had offered nothing. Targets sighted, then lost. Convoys too heavily guarded. Japanese aircraft forcing them down into the silent depths again and again. The result was a clean logbook. 0 confirmed kills. On the bridge, the weight of this mission rested on Lieutenant Commander William A. Stevenson, 32 years old, a commander on his very first war patrol. He had taken the helm only weeks before, replacing a man the crew knew well. His own simply inherited it? Today, those questions would be answered. The crew, well-trained and hungry for action, would soon discover their new captain was a man of aggression, patience, and lethal instinct. Below, the submarine was a living machine. 4 Fairbanks Morse diesel engines thrummed with power, not only driving the boat forward, but also recharging the vital batteries depleted during the previous night's submerged patrol. On the surface, she was loud, exposed. But this was a necessary ritual, the beast drawing a deep breath before the silent hunt below. On the bridge, 4 lookouts scanned their assigned sectors, their powerful binoculars sweeping the horizon. A routine honed by weeks of empty seas, a pattern of vigilance that was about to be broken. At precisely 11:21 hours, a single moment slicing through the monotony. A voice, a sighting. The long wait was over. The crew's hunger was about to be satisfied. And in the vast, indifferent blue of the Pacific, William Stevenson's war had finally begun. The Pacific Ocean, an endless, indifferent expanse of blue, where the horizon is a razor's edge between sea and sky. For the men of the submarine USS Aspro, this was the entire world. A steel cylinder suspended between 2 infinities, propelled by diesel engines and a silent, predatory purpose. The days bled into one another, marked only by the sun's arc and the changing of the watch. A routine of crushing monotony, punctuated by moments of pure, heart-stopping terror. On the bridge, the air was thick with the smell of salt and diesel, a constant reminder of their isolation. Then, a voice cut through the drone of the engines, sharp and clear. The after lookout, his eyes raw from staring into the glare. Smoke, bearing 320. Range estimated 20,000 yards. The words hung in the air for a fraction of a second. Smoke. A single syllable that shattered the calm. On this vast, empty chessboard, smoke was not an accident of nature. Smoke meant a machine. A machine meant men. And in 1944, in these waters, that meant a potential target. A target meant an opportunity to alter the course of the war, 1 torpedo at a time. Captain William Stevenson raised his binoculars, the heavy brass cool against his hands. He trained them on the bearing, his movements economical, honed by countless hours of the hunt. Through the powerful, salt-crusted optics, a smudge appeared, a thin, dark line clinging stubbornly to the curve of the earth. Too low for the billowing plume of a merchant ship. The angle was all wrong for an aircraft's contrail. The signature was distinct, a dark, almost black smoke, tinged with a faint brownish hue. The unmistakable exhalation of diesel engines running on a slightly rich fuel mixture. Submarine exhaust. Definitely submarine exhaust. Within 30 seconds, the executive officer, Lieutenant Donald Barnes, was on the bridge, his presence a quiet current of lethal purpose. Captain, recommend coming to course 320. Close the contact, develop the situation. Stevenson nodded, his eyes never leaving the eyepieces. Agreed. Make it so. Maintain current speed. We don't want to alarm him. The command was relayed. The helmsman acknowledged. Deep within the hull of the Aspro, rudders shifted, and the submarine began a slow, deliberate turn to port. A steel predator, adjusting its course, scenting its prey. The range began to close, but glacially. They were a ghost on the water, careful not to create an unusual wake, not to push their own engines and betray their presence with an excessive smoke signature. It was a delicate, deadly ballet. The smoke grew clearer, a dark feather against the pale sky. The volume, the color, it all pointed to a large submarine. A vessel running on the surface, its engines gulping air to recharge its vital batteries, or perhaps making a high-speed transit between stations. Japanese naval doctrine favored this risk. In areas where American air superiority was not yet absolute, they would run on the surface during daylight. It was faster. It allowed for a better lookout. It made tactical sense, but it was built on a single, critical assumption, that no American submarines were present. That assumption was about to prove fatal. What no one on the Aspro could know was the identity of their quarry. They were closing not on some small coastal patrol boat, but on a leviathan of the deep. The I-43, a Type B-1 cruiser submarine of the Imperial Japanese Navy, a vessel of staggering scale, 2,584 tons on the surface, 358 feet of lethal purpose, a crew of 112 officers and men. Her armament was formidable: 6 bow torpedo tubes, 1 in the stern, a 140-millimeter deck gun, and aft of her conning tower, a watertight hangar housing a Yokosuka reconnaissance seaplane, giving her eyes that could see far beyond the horizon. She was large, powerful, and commanded by a well-trained crew. Under different circumstances, the I-43 would be a fearsome opponent. But today, circumstance was a current running against her. Just 18 days earlier, on January 28, 1944, she had departed the fortress of Truk Lagoon, her mission a vital one. Two worlds, unaware of each other, were now converging at a precise point in the unforgiving Pacific. One, confident in the empty sky above; the other, a silent hunter, rising from the depths below. And it all began, as it so often did in the vastness of the ocean, with a single, dark line against the sky. In the vast, silent expanse of the Pacific, a vessel moved with an almost arrogant confidence. The Japanese submarine I-43 cut through the waves at a steady 14 knots, its diesel engines a rhythmic, untroubled heartbeat. Her mission was the very definition of routine: delivering mail and fresh personnel to the remote Japanese garrisons scattered across the Marshall Islands. A simple logistics run, nothing more. At her helm was an officer of considerable experience, a veteran of multiple war patrols whose name would be lost to the sea, a ghost in the annals of naval intelligence. But all the experience in the Imperial Japanese Navy could not counteract a doctrine built on a fatal assumption: the belief that this particular stretch of ocean was safe. a belief that American submarines prowled the major shipping lanes far to the south, leaving these transit corridors uncontested. That confidence was a phantom, a deadly illusion. Beneath the surface, another predator was listening. The USS Aspro was precisely where no American submarine was supposed to be. A ghost in the machine, a silent hunter moving through the deep. The first hint of contact was a whisper, a faint anomaly that drew the full, undivided attention of the American crew. Then, the periscope broke the surface, a single, glistening eye in the endless blue. The hunt began. Aspro closed the distance, a patient, deliberate shadow. By 11:35 in the morning, just 14 minutes after that initial whisper of detection, the range had compressed to 18,000 yards, 9 nautical miles. Close enough. Through the powerful optics of his binoculars, Commander William Stevenson could see the details crystallize. This was no merchant vessel. It was a submarine, a large one. The profile was unmistakable. The tall, distinctive conning tower, the deck guns visible fore and aft, the telltale structure of an aircraft hangar behind the tower. It was an I-class fleet submarine, a prime target. It churned northwest at a constant speed, trailing a thin, delicate plume of diesel exhaust against the sky. A signature, a beacon. More telling than what Stevenson could see was what he could not. There were no sudden course corrections, no variations in speed, no lookouts frantically scanning the horizon behind them. The Japanese vessel sailed on as if it were alone in the world, utterly oblivious to the American submarine closing relentlessly on its stern. A creature blind to the shark rising from the depths. For Stevenson, the calculation was swift. The conclusion, absolute. This was a target worth every risk. Sinking a warship, especially a submarine, was a far more complex challenge than sinking a freighter. But the strategic prize was immeasurably greater. Every enemy submarine sent to the bottom was one less threat to Allied supply lines, one less reconnaissance platform charting American movements, one less set of eyes and ears for the Japanese high command. To remove a submarine from the board was to blind the enemy, to sever a vital artery. The decision was made in a heartbeat. The command cut through the tense quiet of the conning tower. Battle stations. All hands to battle stations for a surface attack. The strident, jarring clang of the general alarm ripped through every compartment of the Aspro. The atmosphere inside the steel hull transformed instantly. The practiced calm of the hunt was shattered, replaced by a surge of focused, lethal energy. This was the moment they had trained for, drilled for, lived for. Torpedo men scrambled to their weapon stations, their movements a blur of practiced efficiency. The fire control party converged on the torpedo data computer, their minds racing through complex calculations of speed, angle, and distance. In the sonar room, operators strained their hearing, listening to the passive symphony of the ocean, filtering out everything but the sound of their prey. The entire submarine became a single, living weapon, its crew the synchronized components of a machine designed for one purpose. A routine delivery of mail and men was about to be interrupted. The empty ocean was no longer empty. And for the anonymous commander of the I-43, the rhythm of his untroubled journey was about to end in a cataclysm of fire and water. His fatal assumption had led him here, into the crosshairs of an enemy he never even knew was there. The engineering crew braced for the order. Every man below deck knew what the alarm meant. Contact. A target. An attack now imminent. Deep in the Pacific, the hunt had begun. It was 11:40 hours. The USS Aspro, a shadow beneath the waves, held its course at 320 degrees. Speed, 12 knots. Ahead, a silhouette against the horizon, the Japanese submarine I-43, pushing northwest at an estimated 14 knots. The geometry of the encounter was brutally simple. Two predators on intersecting paths, closing on one another across an empty ocean. But simple geometry rarely translates to a simple execution. The ocean is not a chart, it is a battlefield. And the single, overriding question consumed Commander Harry Stevenson: how to close the gap, how to move from detection to destruction without ever being seen. 3 paths unfolded in his mind, each a universe of risk and reward. The first was the path of the ghost. Maintain their current speed, creep in over hours, a patient, imperceptible approach. The advantage was stealth. The disadvantage, time. A single, random course change by the I-43, and the target would vanish back into the blue infinity. The second option was the path of the brute. Full speed ahead, a desperate, high-speed dash to close the range and strike fast. The advantage was time. The disadvantage, noise and visibility. Such a charge would churn the sea, throwing a bow wave and a plume of diesel smoke that would act as a flare, announcing their presence to any sharp-eyed Japanese lookout. Then there was the third way, a synthesis of the other two, the hunter's gambit. Increase speed moderately, close the distance to a medium range, and then decide. Press the attack on the surface or slip beneath the waves for a submerged, silent kill. This was the option that resonated with Stevenson's tactical soul, a balance of aggression and caution. The order was given: increase speed to 15 knots, maintain visual contact, track his every move. The great diesels of the Aspro groaned, their pitch deepening as they drank more fuel. The submarine surged forward, her speed climbing from 12 knots to 15 over 3 agonizingly slow minutes. The bow wave swelled, a white slash against the dark water. The wake behind them grew more pronounced. Yet the smoke signature remained manageable, the dark exhaust dissipating into the scattered clouds, a faint haze not so different from the one trailing the I-43 herself. Steadily, relentlessly, the American submarine devoured the distance. 18,000 yards, 17,500, 17,000. On the bridge of the Aspro, every eye was strained, watching the Japanese boat. There was no change in its course, no alteration in its speed, no sign of detection, nothing. At 1200 hours, 39 minutes into the chase, the range had fallen to 17,000 yards. They had closed 1,000 yards in 25 minutes. The cold arithmetic was unforgiving. At this rate, it would take approximately 7 hours to close from 17,000 yards to the 2,000-yard range required for a torpedo attack. 7 hours. An eternity in submarine warfare. An eternity for the enemy to make a single, unpredictable turn. This was the true danger. Japanese naval doctrine was clear. Submarines were to alter their course every 30 to 60 minutes as a standard anti-submarine precaution. These random zigzags were designed precisely to frustrate the kind of calculated pursuit the Aspro was now engaged in. Lex, unpredictable puzzle. Aboard the I-43, the morning watch continued with routine efficiency. The submarine was making excellent time, slicing through favorable seas on its way to the Marshall Islands. The sun was warm. The air was clean. For the men on her deck, it was just another day at sea, their vessel a solitary island of purpose on a vast, indifferent ocean. They were completely unaware of the second island, the Hunter, methodically closing the distance, turning the cold calculus of the chase into a deadly, unalterable appointment. The ocean was a sheet of polished glass. Visibility stretched to a flawless horizon, undisturbed by weather or wing. For weeks, the skies over this northern passage had remained empty of American aircraft. Intelligence reports painted a clear picture. Enemy submarines were hunting far to the south, stalking the bustling convoy routes between Truk and Rabaul. This stretch of water was a sanctuary, a quiet corridor in a world at war. The assessment was logical, built on a foundation of sound analysis. American wolf packs swarmed where the prey was thickest. But logic is a fragile shield against the improbable. And lurking in that improbability was the USS Aspro, an exception with a deadly purpose. On the bridge of the Imperial submarine I-43, her captain surveyed his domain. A veteran of countless war patrols, a commander whose reputation was forged in the fire of successful attacks, he was a portrait of confidence. His lookouts performed their duties with practiced precision, sweeping the forward sectors, the beams, the vast emptiness ahead. A textbook search pattern, disciplined, thorough, and completely blind. Their backs were turned to the one direction that mattered. Imperial naval doctrine was a rigid thing, a catechism that taught one simple truth: the enemy lies in wait. The threat always comes from the front. A chase from the stern was a tactical absurdity, requiring an enemy to be perfectly positioned for a pursuit that could last for hours. It was. Because behind the I-43, Commander Stevenson of the Aspro was making that absurdity a reality. For 69 minutes he had shadowed his prey, a ghost on the water. The distance was 16,000 yards, a chasm of blue water. The closing speed was steady, but not decisive. A random course change, a simple zig instead of a zag, and the I-43 could vanish back into the immensity of the Pacific. At 12:30, the moment for patience was over. The time for pressure had arrived. A command cut through the tension of the control room. All ahead full, maximum sustainable speed. Deep within the hull, the engineering officer relayed the order. Throttles slammed open. 4 colossal Fairbanks-Morse diesel engines, the heart of the beast, awoke with a deafening roar. The submarine didn't just accelerate, it lunged. The deck plates began to thrum, then vibrate, then shudder with a violent mechanical agony. 15 knots, 17, 19. The needle climbed past 20. Thick black smoke boiled from the exhaust, a dark plume staining the pristine sky. The bow wave, once a gentle curl, became a churning wall of white water, a beacon visible for miles. The rated surface speed for a Below-class submarine was 20¼ knots. The Aspro was tearing that limit to shreds. The ocean began to shrink. 16,000 yards became 15,700, then 15,400. Every 60 seconds, 300 yards of sea simply ceased to exist between hunter and hunted. The cold arithmetic was promising. At this velocity, attack range would be achieved in just under 4 hours. But this was a brutal pace. 4 hours of running at the absolute red line was an invitation for catastrophic failure. A voice crackled over the intercom from the engine room, laced with concern. The captain was informed. All 4 main engines at full rated power. Temperatures and pressures were holding, but just within their limits. They were burning through fuel at an unsustainable rate. The machines could not endure this punishment forever. The chase was no longer just a matter of tactics. It was now a race against the very laws of physics and the endurance of steel. A choice had been made: to risk the ship's own destruction for the certainty of the kill. Ahead, the I-43 sailed on, its crew oblivious, secure in their training, their doctrine, and their unwavering focus on the empty horizon before them. They moved through an ocean that felt as safe as a harbor, a placid expanse of polished glass. Entirely unaware of the thundering fury that was closing the distance, 1 yard at a time, from the one direction they never thought to look. The engines are screaming, a frantic mechanical roar that speaks of a voracious thirst for fuel. Consumption is extreme, a hemorrhage of diesel at 3 times the standard rate. Every gallon burned in the service of a single objective: speed. On the bridge of the USS Aspro, Commander Stevenson has weighed the cost. He has seen the engineering reports. He knows the relentless logic of the fuel gauges. But the shadow on the horizon, the fleeting silhouette of his target, is too valuable to let slip away. His orders are unflinching. Maintain full power, watch the temperatures, and push the machinery to the very edge of its endurance. The submarine has ceased to be a vessel. It is now a weapon in motion, a steel predator closing the gap. 99 minutes have passed, an eternity measured in the churn of propellers and the silent, shared focus of the crew. They have clawed back 5,000 yards of open ocean. The range has narrowed to 15,000 yards. Below decks, the air is thick with the metallic tang of anticipation. Every man is a coiled spring, his confidence a thin, hard shell over the raw tension of the hunt. Through the powerful lenses of the periscope, the target remains stubbornly serene. The Japanese submarine, I-43, plows ahead on a steady northwest course at 14 knots, completely unaware of the doom gathering at its stern. Its lookouts, perched high on the conning tower, diligently scan the waves ahead. No one is looking back. No one sees the ghost rising from their wake. Yet a profound and unsettling question hangs in the compressed air of the control room. It is a question that defies the physics of naval warfare. Why are they still invisible? Aspro is not a silent hunter. At 20 knots, she boils the sea, trailing a thick, dark plume of diesel smoke, a flag of war painted against the sky. The Japanese are not fools. Their optical equipment is among the best in the world. Their lookouts trained to spot exactly this kind of signature against the endless blue. The continued silence from the enemy is more unnerving than an alarm. It feels. The truth is not a single catastrophic error, but a fatal conspiracy of circumstance. A perfect storm of doctrine, physics, and human fallibility. Aboard I-43, the lookouts are prisoners of their own training. Their gaze is fixed forward, their attention focused on the sectors from which doctrine dictates a threat will emerge. The sea behind them is a lower priority, a blank space on their mental map. Nature itself has become Aspro's accomplice. The American submarine is approaching from the southeast, from the precise angle where the morning sun transforms the ocean surface into a blinding mirror of shattered light. For the Japanese sailors staring wansing on the water, providing intermittent cover, a fleeting glimpse of Aspro's smoke could be easily dismissed as a trick of the light, a passing shadow, a phantom on the edge of vision. And finally, there is the mission itself. I-43 is not hunting, it is traveling, pushing to reach the Marshall Islands with haste. Its commander has accepted a degree of risk, trading absolute defensive vigilance for a faster transit. It is a calculated gamble, a gamble that is about to be lost in the most spectacular way imaginable. At 13:30 hours, the tactical equation is violently rewritten. The world tilts. I-43 alters its course. A sudden 45-degree turn from northwest to northeast. A maneuver that swings the massive enemy vessel directly toward Aspro's position. Is it a random zigzag, a standard precautionary measure against unseen threats? A mere coincidence of navigation? Or has the prey, at the last possible moment, finally sensed the predator on its trail. The reason is suddenly irrelevant. The elegant geometry of the stern chase has been shattered. The element of surprise, so carefully maintained, may have evaporated in an instant. The hunter and the hunted are no longer in a line of pursuit. They are turning to face one another. The risk Stevenson took was measured in gallons of fuel. The risk the Japanese commander took was measured in degrees of vigilance. Now, in the vast, indifferent theater of the Pacific, those two gambles are set to collide. The geometry of the hunt had shifted. A subtle, almost imperceptible change in the vast emptiness of the Pacific. On the plot, the bearing to the target crept from 320 degrees to 345. The distance was still closing, but the rate of that closure had slowed. An instinctual twitch from the prey. Commander Stevenson read the signs. If the Japanese submarine, the I-43, had truly detected the Aspro, she would have already vanished. A crash dive into the cold, crushing depths. This course change was something else. Not knowledge, not certainty. It was a flicker of suspicion, a ghost on their sensors that prompted a defensive turn. It was a mistake. Stevenson gave the order, his voice cutting through the tense quiet of the control room. Come right to new course 045, matches heading, maintain full speed. The Aspro heeled over, its powerful diesel engines thundering as it carved a new path through the waves, paralleling the unseen enemy. The chase was on. Two steel predators, now racing northeast at flank speed across the ocean's skin. 14,500 yards of open water separated them, a gulf that was no longer shrinking rapidly, but holding steady. This was now a battle of endurance, a test of machinery and will. The Aspro held the crucial advantage, a 6-knot edge in speed, 20 knots against the I-43's 14. It was not a decisive margin, but over time it would be enough. Time was the weapon. With every passing hour, the Aspro would pull ahead, slowly, methodically, maneuvering into a position from which there could be no escape. The afternoon bled away into a rhythm of controlled tension. 1,400 hours, 1,430, 1,500. The men remained at their battle stations, a silent, focused vigil now entering its 4th hour. They rotated in place, keeping their senses sharp, their minds clear. Mugs of black coffee made their way through the compartments. Sandwiches, passed forward from the galley, were eaten in silence at their posts. No one left their station. Every man aboard understood the stakes. This could take hours more. And in a long chase, stamina is as vital as strategy. From the engine room, the reports were a drumbeat of power and consequence. The engineering officer's voice, calm over the intercom, laid out the cold arithmetic of their pursuit. Engines performing well. Fuel consumption, extreme. Their current state was 58%. Just to return to Pearl Harbor from this remote stretch of ocean would consume 35%, with a standard safety margin. That left a razor-thin 23% for the patrol, for the fight. At their current burn rate, they had approximately 6 more hours at maximum power. Stevenson did the math in his head, a simple calculation with impossible weight. 6 hours at 20 knots would cover 120 nautical miles. It should be enough. Enough to close the distance, execute the attack, and break away. Probably. Maybe. But such calculations lived in a perfect world, a world without complications. And combat was nothing but a series of unforeseen complications. The decision, however, was already made. Press the attack. The fuel would have to be a problem for later. At 15:30 hours, the ocean finally gave up its secret. A new sound entered the headphones of the sonar operators, a faint, rhythmic pulse growing steadily in strength. For hours they had been listening, straining to hear anything over the roar of their own engines. The range had been too great. But now, at 13,000 yards, the sound became undeniable. It was the thrashing of the I-43's propellers, an acoustic signature traveling through the water. The prey now had a voice. The sonar supervisor's report was clinical, precise, yet it electrified the room. Clear propeller contact, bearing 347. Range estimated 13,000 yards, based on signal strength. Propeller count indicates 2 shafts, possibly 3. The blade count is consistent with a large Japanese submarine. The invisible enemy, a ghost on a radar screen, was finally becoming real. A heartbeat, echoing from the deep. The sound was a whisper at first, a faint disturbance in the vast, silent theater of the deep. Then it sharpened into a signature, a rhythm, the unmistakable pulse of a machine built for war. On board the American submarine Aspro, the acoustic confirmation was absolute. The ghost in the hydrophones now had a name. I-43, or one of her sisters. A legitimate target. In that moment, the abstract hunt became a visceral reality. Every man knew this was happening. By 1600 hours, the equation of the hunt began to shift. The distance was 13,000 yards, a formidable gap. But something far more critical had changed: the angle of attack. 4 hours of punishing speed had not just closed the distance, they had redrawn the map of the engagement. Aspro was no longer trailing helplessly in the enemy's wake. The American submarine had clawed its way forward, pulling wide onto the Japanese vessel's port quarter, a position roughly 45 degrees behind its beam. This was not a chase. It was the careful, deliberate choreography of an ambush. A shot from the stern is a prayer. A shot from the beam is a promise. The geometry was evolving, bending to the will of Aspro's commander. Another 2 hours, another surge of power, and they would be ahead of their quarry's path. There they could cut their engines, become a silent steel predator lying in wait, and let the unsuspecting I-43 sail directly into their sights. The plan was crystallizing as the sun began its slow descent toward the western horizon. Sunset at this latitude in mid-February would arrive around 1900 hours. The approaching twilight offered a cloak of invisibility for the final approach. But it was a double-edged sword. The fading light that concealed Aspro would also obscure its target. The timeline was a razor's edge. Position the boat ahead of the track before dark. Close the final distance in the gray ambiguity of twilight, and execute the attack in the first shroud of true night, when the human eye is most easily deceived. The pace could not slacken. At 1700 hours, the range had narrowed to 12,500 yards. For 5 hours and 39 minutes, Aspro had been a relentless shadow. Over 110 nautical miles burned through the deep at a speed that strained her engines and crew. The I-43, cruising at a steady 14 knots, had covered 80 nautical miles. Both submarines were hemorrhaging fuel at an unsustainable rate. But for one, it was the cost of transit. For the other, it was the price of the kill. Aboard the I-43, the world was calm. The afternoon watch changed with practiced routine efficiency. New lookouts climbed to the bridge, their eyes scanning the empty sea. A new officer of the deck took his station. The briefing was brief, unremarkable. Maintain course 045, speed 14 knots. Destination, the Marshall Islands. Estimated arrival in 72 hours. No contacts, no threats. The outgoing watch descended below, leaving the new crew to stare out at an ocean that held no surprises. They began their scans, methodical, rhythmic, forward, starboard beam, Port beam. A sweep of the sky. Still, no one gave more than a fleeting glance astern. Still, no one saw the low, dark shape that clung to their wake. 12,000 yards, 6 nautical miles, close enough to be seen with the naked eye on a clear day. Unmistakable through binoculars had anyone pointed them in the right direction. But no one looked. At 1800 hours, the American submarine remained a phantom, a creature of pure intent, invisible to Japanese eyes. The distance between two worlds was just 6 nautical miles. The distance between a routine voyage and oblivion was a single backward glance that was never taken. The sun bled across the western horizon, painting the Pacific in hues of fire and deep violet. In the submarine world, this is not the golden hour. It is the hour of the wolf. The distance was 12,000 yards, a gulf of open water separating two apex predators. On the bridge of the American submarine, USS Aspro, the world was a set of numbers, a series of calculations converging on a single, violent purpose. For hours, the position of the Japanese I-43 had been a shifting problem of geometry and speed. Now, the enemy was almost directly abeam, a stark silhouette 90 degrees off the port side. The bearing to the target had crept from 347 degrees to due north. Aspro was pulling ahead. The geometry was no longer just advantageous, it was perfect. Commander Stevenson gave the order, his voice cutting through the hum of the diesel engines. "Come left to new course 315. The command was quiet, precise. It was the opening move in a final, deadly gambit. "We're going to sweep around ahead of his track and set up for a perpendicular bow shot." The submarine leaned into the turn, its steel hull carving a path toward the northwest. This was the beginning of a wide, patient arc, a circling maneuver designed to place Aspro directly in the path of its unsuspecting prey. The final approach had begun. This was a dance of immense precision, a maneuver that demanded flawless timing and navigation. Aspro curved northwest, then west, then southwest, all while maintaining a constant separation of 12,000 yards from the I-43's projected course. In essence, the American boat was drawing a massive, invisible circle on the ocean's surface, aimed at a single point in space and time where the I-43 would be in precisely 90 minutes. The maneuver was costly, burning time and precious fuel. But the prize it offered was the perfect attack geometry, an inescapable trap. By 1830 hours, half the arc was complete. Aspro was now west of the I-43, a silent observer watching its target steam obligingly from the east. The range remained a constant 12,000 yards. The bearing, however, was changing, slowly. It shifted from north to northeast as the Japanese submarine held its steady course, completely oblivious. The plan was working, the geometry holding true with mathematical certainty. At 1900 hours, the last sliver of the sun vanished. Sunset was complete. The world dissolved into a deep twilight, a realm of low light where shapes bled into shadows. Visibility was drastically reduced, yet both submarines were still visible to a keen eye. The I-43's silhouette was a dark shape against the still faint glow of the eastern sky. Aspro, with its darker gray paint scheme, melted into the growing blackness of the west. A ghost against the dark. Stevenson knew this was the critical moment. "All ahead standard," he ordered, reducing speed to 16 knots. Stealth now mattered more than speed. The roar of the diesels subsided to a disciplined hum. The bow wave, once a proud white slash against the blue, flattened, ceasing its telltale hiss. The plume of diesel smoke thinned to a whisper barely visible against the darkening sky. Aspro was becoming a phantom, just as the risk of being detected was at its peak. The tactical situation was now brutally simple. Two predators, separated by miles of open water. One, a ghost, aware and closing its trap. The other, a shadow, steaming toward its final destination. The attack range for a moving target was 2,000 yards. Aspro still needed to close a gap of 10,000 yards. But now, the closing would happen naturally. The I-43 was driving itself toward Aspro's position. The cold arithmetic of the sea dictated the final timeline. To cover that distance at the I-43's approach speed would take approximately 90 minutes. The attack would occur around 20-30 hours, in the full, unforgiving darkness of the open ocean. The trap was set, the countdown had begun, and on the calm surface of the Pacific, one submarine sailed serenely on, while the other waited, a patient instrument of destruction, poised at the edge of the abyss. The world had dissolved into absolute black. Perfect conditions for a final approach. But for Commander William Stevenson, a decision hung in the silent, pressurized air of the control room. A choice between two forms of war. To attack on the surface was to embrace speed, to keep the enemy in sight, to retain the ability to maneuver with a predator's grace. It was the bold choice. It was also the choice that painted a target on their back, a stark silhouette against the faint starlight, vulnerable to any watchful eye. The alternative was to disappear, to become a phantom in the deep. A submerged attack offered the ultimate advantage: surprise. The ability to strike from nowhere and vanish back into the crushing dark. But this path was fraught with its own perils. Speed bled away to a mere 9 knots. The submarine's batteries, its very lifeblood, would drain with every silent rotation of the propellers. And the periscope, their only eye on the world above, was a thin, silver betrayal, easily spotted in a calm sea. It was a choice that balanced raw offensive power against the cold, hard science of survival. Stevenson chose stealth. His voice, calm and low, cut through the tension. "We'll close on the surface to 6,000 yards, then dive for a submerged approach. Pass the word to all stations. Prepare to dive at 2000 hours." At 1930, the range was 11,000 yards. Through the powerful optics, the Japanese submarine I-43 was a clear, dark shape against a slightly lighter sky, a ghost ship making steady progress to the northeast. Aboard the USS Aspro, the American crew was a study in disciplined exhaustion. For 7 straight hours, they had been at battle stations. 7 hours of coiled anticipation. Every man was weary, yet every eye was sharp, every mind focused. They understood the rarity of this moment. A submarine stalking another submarine across 150 nautical miles of open ocean. This was not just an engagement. It was history being written in the deep. Nobody spoke. Not a single unnecessary word. There was only the hum of machinery, the faint scent of ozone and filtered air, and the steady, rhythmic ping of the sonar, the submarine's own heartbeat. From the sonar station, a quiet voice provided the continuous narrative of the hunt. Target bearing 042, range estimated 11,000 yards based on signal strength. Course steady, 045. Speed steady, 14 knots. The acoustic intelligence was a perfect mirror of the visual. The I-43 was operating on a routine transit, no evasive maneuvers, no random course changes. The propeller blade rate was constant. The Japanese crew had no eye. The stalking continued, a silent, deadly ballet choreographed across miles of empty sea. Then, at 1945, something changed. The rhythm broke. The I-43 made a course adjustment. Not a major panicked turn, but a subtle shift. From a northeast course of 045, it now steered north-northeast to a new course of 020, a 25-degree change. A ripple of uncertainty moved through the Aspro's control room. Why? Was it a random course correction? A planned turn at a navigational waypoint? Or had they somehow been detected, a flicker of suspicion prompting a minor evasion? Stevenson raised his binoculars, his gaze fixed on the distant shape. He saw nothing. No signs of alarm. Her speed was unchanged. No lookouts scrambled on her deck. No preparations. But the turn, born of Japanese routine, became an American advantage. The I-43's new course was now aimed more directly toward the Aspro's waiting position. The range would close faster. The attack window was opening sooner than they had dared to hope. At 2000 hours, the range dropped to 10,000 yards. The last vestiges of twilight had vanished. The darkness was no one. There was no moon. The conditions were perfect. The decision, made in the fading light, had led them to this precise moment, a moment of absolute stealth in a world of absolute black. A sliver of darkness against a black ocean. In the vast, empty expanse of the Pacific, one hunter watches another. The Japanese submarine I-43 is a ghost on the horizon, a fleeting shadow barely discernible to the naked eye. But on the USS Aspro, the faint, intermittent pulse of the SJ surface search radar confirms what the lookouts suspect. A contact. Solid. The electronic ghost provides the numbers, range, bearing, cold data to supplement the primal instinct of the hunt. There is no more time for debate. The moment to vanish has arrived. The command cuts through the night air. Clear the bridge. Dive. Dive. The alarm shrieks twice, a piercing cry that echoes through the steel confines of the Aspro. Lookouts cascade down through the bridge hatch, a flurry of motion. The officer of the deck is the last to descend, the last to see the open sky before the heavy steel hatch slams shut, sealing them in their own world. A world of recycled air and artificial light. The roar of the main vents opening is a violent exhalation as the ballast tanks flood with thousands of gallons of cold seawater. At 8 in the evening, the USS Aspro surrenders to gravity, slipping beneath the waves without a trace. The submarine levels off at 60 feet, periscope depth, a delicate frontier between the crushing pressure of the deep and the vulnerable surface world above. Commander Stevenson raises the search periscope with a surgeon's care. A slow, deliberate rotation. Too much exposure, a flash of sunlight on the lens, a telltale wake, and the hunter becomes the hunted. He scans the horizon, now a distorted, watery lens. There, bearing 038. Range approximately 10,000 yards. The I-43 steams on, a black shape cutting through the water, oblivious. Its course is steady, unwavering, bringing it closer with every passing minute. A perfect approach. The command is quiet, confident, downscope. The view of the enemy vanishes. The Aspro is now blind, relying on its other senses. Come to course 038, all ahead 2/3. The deep thrum of the diesel engines is gone, replaced by the hushed, electric hum of the motors. The submarine is a silent predator now, a creature of the deep, moving through dark water toward its unsuspecting prey. 8 knots. A patient, deliberate pace to close the distance without a sound. In the conning tower, a different kind of mind is at work. The fire control party gathers around the torpedo data computer, the TDC, a mechanical marvel of gears, dials, and gyros, an analog brain calculating the precise moment of destruction. Lieutenant Commander Barnes oversees the ritual, his voice low and steady as he feeds the machine the variables of the kill. Target bearing 038. Range 10,000 yards. Estimated course 020. Estimated speed 14 knots. The operator's hands move with practiced efficiency. Set torpedo depth 10 feet. The target is a submarine, its draft shallow. Set torpedo speed high. A quick run means less time for the enemy to react, less time for fate to intervene. The TDC whirs and clicks, absorbing the data, calculating the complex trigonometry of the attack. It begins to develop a solution, a firing command that will send 4,000 pounds of high explosives across the dark water. But 10,000 yards is an impossible distance. A shot of faith, not physics. They need to get closer, much closer. 2,000 yards is the ideal range for a reliable kill. At 15 minutes past 8, the range has closed to 9,000 yards. The Aspro has been submerged for 12 minutes. The massive batteries hold a charge of approximately 85%, more than enough. The submarine closes steadily at 8 knots. The I-43 approaches at 14. A combined closing speed of 22 knots. The gap between them shrinks with terrifying speed. 9,000 yards, 8,700, 8,400. Inside the steel hull, the tension is a physical presence. The air grows thick with unspoken anticipation. Only the sonar room breaks the silence. The operator's voice is a calm, steady metronome counting down to oblivion. Target bearing 036, range decreasing, propeller blade rate steady. The passive sonar can now clearly hear the rhythmic beat of the I-43's screws, a sound signature as unique as a fingerprint. There is no indication the target has detected them. The Japanese submarine makes no attempt at quiet operation. It runs at normal cruising power, churning the water, broadcasting its presence for miles. Japanese naval doctrine assumed this vast stretch of ocean was safe, a private highway immune to American predators. That assumption was a fatal miscalculation, a strategic blindness that was slowly, methodically costing them the war. At 8:30 in the evening, the distance continues to collapse. The mechanical brain of the TDC refines its deadly calculations. And in the silent, pressurized world of the USS Aspro, dozens of men hold their breath, waiting for the single command that will turn a sliver of darkness on the horizon into a column of fire and smoke. 8,000 yards. In the crushing blackness of the Pacific, a distance both immense and intimate. Through the lens of a periscope, a sliver of glass piercing the surface, Commander William Stevenson held the enemy in his sights. The Japanese submarine I-43 was a ghost. A faint silhouette etched against a horizon only marginally less dark than the sea itself. It moved with a steady, unsuspecting rhythm, closing the gap toward the USS Aspro's hidden position. The hunt was on. But this was a game of impossible patience. The Japanese vessel was running a straight, predictable course, a gift to the fire control party, who worked in the dim, red light of the control room, their calculations solidifying into a lethal solution. Yet, 8,000 yards was a chasm. The era's most advanced torpedoes boasted a theoretical range of 4,500 yards. But in the unforgiving reality of open ocean combat, hitting a moving target from beyond 2,000 was a prayer, not a plan. They had to close the distance. 6,000 more yards of water to cross. At their current speed, that meant another 45 minutes. 45 minutes suspended in time, where a single mistake, a single stray noise, could turn the hunter into the hunted. The minutes bled into one another. At 2:45 in the morning, the range fell to 7,000 yards. The Aspro had now been submerged for 42 minutes, a silent predator gliding 5 nautical miles through the deep. The air inside grew thick, heavy with unspoken tension. On the battery gauge, a needle read 78%. More than enough. Enough power for the attack, and, crucially, enough for the desperate, high-speed escape. The crew adhered to the sacred rites of silent running. Absolute stillness. No unnecessary movement. Only the most essential systems were permitted to draw power, to make a sound. Every man knew that the slightest clang of a dropped tool, the faintest hum of a non-essential motor, could be a death sentence, carried through the water to the sensitive hydrophones of their prey. But the passive sonar told a different story. The I-43 was not listening. It was not actively searching. It was simply traveling, operating with a confidence that was about to become fatal. At 2100 hours, the gap narrowed to 6,000 yards. A decision point was approaching. The geometry of the engagement was head-on, a direct approach that minimized the time to close but offered a terrible angle for an attack. Torpedoes fired from the bow would strike the target at a shallow, oblique angle, with a high probability of glancing off the hull harmlessly. The perfect shot was perpendicular, a broadside strike at a clean 90 degrees that would tear into the enemy's flank. Stevenson made his choice. They would close to 5,000 yards, then execute a hard turn to position for that perfect beam shot. At 21:15, the moment arrived. 5,000 yards. The order cut through the silence. Right full rudder. Come to course 330. The Aspro heeled over, the massive steel cylinder curving sharply from its northeast heading to the northwest. The submarine was no longer chasing. It was setting an ambush. The maneuver placed Aspro directly across the I-43's path, a wall of unseen menace waiting in the dark. The entire dynamic of the battle shifted in that single, graceful turn. The geometry was no longer a chase. It was an intersection. The I-43 was now steaming from Aspro's starboard side, moving from left to right across its bow. The target was sailing directly into the torpedo tubes. The fire control solution, calculated by the intricate gears of the torpedo data computer, updated with relentless precision. The numbers came in a calm, steady cadence, each one a nail in the enemy's coffin. Target bearing 090, due east, range 4,800 yards. Target course 020. Target speed 14 knots. The track angle, the critical relationship between the target's course and the torpedo's path, was closing on 90 degrees. Ideal geometry. The mechanical brain of the TDC had already calculated the intercept point, a specific patch of empty ocean where steel would meet steel. The torpedoes, once fired, would run straight and true on a bearing of 090. They would not be aimed at the submarine. They would be aimed at the point where the submarine was going to be. The vast, uncertain distance of 8,000 yards had been compressed, through patience and predatory skill, into a single, unalterable mathematical certainty. The air inside the steel hull is a cocktail of diesel, sweat, and cold metal. A ghost in the Pacific depths, the submarine USS Aspro moves with a silence that belies its deadly purpose. Above, the surface of the ocean is a churning, indifferent expanse. Below, a crew of 80 men holds its collective breath, their world narrowed to the hum of machinery and the voice of their commander. Through the periscope, the night is absolute, save for a single dark shape slicing through the waves. The enemy. Japanese submarine I-43, a phantom on the water, unaware it is being watched, stalked, and measured for destruction. The calculations are a cold, beautiful geometry of death. The torpedoes are programmed to run toward a specific point in the empty ocean, a point where the I-43 is predicted to be in precisely 90 seconds. If the mathematics hold true, the warheads will strike the target's hull at a perfect 90-degree angle. Not a glancing blow, but a direct, catastrophic impact designed to tear the vessel in two. Maximum damage. A high probability of a kill. At 21:30 hours, the distance shrinks to 4,000 yards. The I-43 is closing, perfectly aligned on the Aspro's beam, a textbook setup for an ambush. Through the high-power optics of the periscope, Commander Stevenson sees it all with chilling clarity. The stark silhouette of the conning tower, the ghostly figures of lookouts on the bridge, their heads turning left, then right, scanning the horizon. He can even make out the deck guns, inert and harmless. Everything is visible. But the I-43 sees nothing. Its lookouts search the empty forward sectors, their gaze fixed on the distance. No one looks down, toward the dark water at their feet, where the slender eye of an American periscope might betray a glint of moonlight. No one suspects a thing. The tactical surprise is absolute. At 21:45 hours, the range reaches 3,000 yards. The sonar operator's voice is a low, steady murmur in the control room. The sound of the target's propellers grows louder, more distinct. A steady blade count. No change in speed. The contact appears completely unaware, driving straight into the jaws of the trap. Another 15 minutes. That is all it will take. The range will shrink to 2,000 yards, point blank for a submarine attack. A shot that cannot miss. The crew waits. A profound silence descends, each man a statue at his post, every muscle coiled. This is the moment they have trained for. This is the brutal reality of combat. Then, at 2200 hours, the unthinkable happens. The I-43 makes an abrupt, unexpected maneuver. The shadow on the water alters its course, turning sharply from north-northeast to southeast. A 90-degree change. The carefully constructed fire control solution, the perfect geometry of the attack, evaporates in an instant. Why? A random anti-submarine zigzag? A response to a suspicious sonar echo from a distant whale? A simple navigational waypoint? It is impossible to know. But the result is the same. The target, once approaching from the east, moving left to right across the Aspro's bow, is now heading away. The bearing is changing rapidly. The range is no longer closing. The golden opportunity is degrading with every passing second. Stevenson reacts instantly, no hesitation. His commands cut through the tension. Left full rudder, come to course 180, increase speed to 9 knots. Stay with him. The Aspro lurches, groaning under the strain of the hard turn, curving from its northwest heading to due south. The electric motors whine as the submarine accelerates to its maximum quiet speed. 9 knots. Fast enough to pursue, yet slow enough to minimize the cavitation of its own propellers, a sound that would give them away. The geometry of the engagement has been shattered and reformed. It is now a stern chase. The I-43 steams southeast at a confident 4-tur achieve. The Japanese submarine is pulling away. The range, once shrinking, now begins to grow. 3,000 yards becomes 3,200, then 3,400. The hunter has been thrown off the scent. The pursuit continues, a silent underwater race between two steel predators. A question hangs in the control room, unspoken but felt by every man. Did they hear us? Did some sixth sense, some whisper of suspicion, warn the Japanese commander at the last possible moment? Stevenson keeps his eye pressed to the periscope, searching for the answer in the enemy's behavior. And he sees something wrong, something that doesn't fit. The I-43 is still on the surface. Its powerful diesel engines are still churning, leaving a faint wake in the dark. This is the critical detail. If the Japanese crew had truly suspected an American submarine in the area, standard procedure would be an immediate, frantic dive to the crushing safety of the deep. A hunted submarine runs and dives. It seeks the darkness and pressure that can shield it from torpedoes. But the I-43 remains on the surface, confident and exposed. The realization dawns. The turn was not evasion. It was not a masterful escape. It was chance. A roll of the dice in the vast, empty ocean. The Japanese submarine is still blind. The crew on its bridge still scans the horizon, oblivious to the tune is not over. In the silent, suffocating world beneath the waves, the Aspro once again settles in for the kill. A ghost in the Pacific depths, waiting for a second chance. The ocean at night is a realm of absolutes, of darkness, of pressure, and of the singular focus of the predator. A missed opportunity is not a failure. It is simply a problem of geometry and time, waiting to be solved. The attack window had closed, but the hunt was not over. It required a repositioning, a recalibration of the mind and the machine, a new attempt. At 22:15 hours, the Phantom they were tracking made its move, a decisive course change. From southeast back to northwest, a full 90-degree turn. This was not a random act. Deep within the enemy vessel, a Japanese commanding officer was adhering to doctrine. The anti-submarine zigzag, a calculated, unpredictable dance designed to sever the invisible thread connecting hunter and prey. Random, jarring course changes every 15 to 30 minutes, intended to shatter the delicate calculations of any potential stalker. The doctrine was sound, a shield of chaos against the cold logic of a torpedo solution. But in the complex calculus of undersea warfare, a shield can become a target. This time, the maneuver designed for salvation became an invitation. The I-43's sudden turn to the northwest did not throw the American submarine Aspro off the scent. It placed the enemy directly back onto an intercept course. The sonar operators felt it first. A shift in the acoustics. The numbers confirmed it. Range 3,500 yards. The bearing was changing, swinging favorably. The track angle, the critical relationship between the two submarines, was improving with every passing second. Inside the fire control computer, gears and dials spun, recalculating, converging on a new solution. The opportunity was returning from the depths. Commander Stevenson gave the order. A calm voice cutting through the tense silence. Come right to course 300. Match his heading. Close slowly. The USS Aspro responded, a silent predator turning in the dark. Now both submarines were ghosts running parallel, slicing through the black water on a northwesterly heading. 3,500 yards of ocean separated them, but a crucial disparity remained. The I-43, running on the surface, was making 14 knots. Below, the submerged Aspro could only manage 9. The Japanese submarine was pulling away. A slow, agonizing bleed of distance. Yet Aspro held a powerful tactical advantage. It was positioned perfectly on the I-43's port beam. The geometry for an attack was good, even as the range increased. All they needed was one more turn, one more roll of the dice in their favor. If the I-43 made another course change, it might just turn toward them, closing the distance, and sealing its own fate. The stalking continued. The hunt was stretching to its breaking point. At 22 and 20 hours, the zigzagging stopped. The I-43 steadied on its northwest course. No more erratic turns, just a straight course and a steady speed. The range began to grow, 3,800 yards, and slowly, inexorably increasing. The Japanese submarine was escaping. Commander Stevenson faced the hunter's oldest dilemma: aggression versus stealth. To surface was to gain speed, to unleash the power of Aspro's diesel engines and easily overtake the prey. But it meant, but to watch the prize slip away into the immensity of the Pacific. He chose a third path, a razor's edge between patience and aggression. He would not surface, but he would not surrender the chase. He would close to the absolute minimum range and prepare to attack, even if the geometry was less than perfect. All ahead full, the command echoed through the hull. Increased to maximum quiet speed, close on him. Aspro surged forward. The electric motors drew the maximum possible current from the batteries, humming with a deep, resonant power. 9 knots, the absolute limit that could be sustained without the propellers cavitating, creating a noise that would scream their presence across the ocean. The submarine vibrated, a living thing straining at the leash. And the range stopped increasing. 3,800 yards, holding steady. It was enough. If Aspro could maintain this delicate equilibrium, this invisible tether, another opportunity might develop. They had only to wait, to be patient, to let the trap set itself. At 21 hours, the equation changed. Instantly, irrevocably. The I-43 turned again. From its northwest course, it swung due west. Another course change in its desperate dance. But this turn was not just a change. It was a gift from the tactical gods. The maneuver placed the Japanese submarine on a course perfectly perpendicular to Aspro. The target was no longer running away. It was now moving from right to left, painting a perfect silhouette across Aspro's bow at 3,800 yards. It was the ideal beam shot. The fire control solution, a complex engine of gears and mathematics, did not hesitate. It locked instantly. The hunt had reached its conclusion. All the patience, all the tension, all the silent pursuit through the crushing dark had led to this single, undeniable truth, displayed in glowing dials. Target bearing 270, due west, range 3,800 yards. In the deep, there is no room for error, only for pressure, for patience, and for the single, perfect moment when the hunter's geometry becomes the target's fate. An invisible line is drawn across the blackness of the Pacific. A problem of pure geometry, played out in thousands of tons of steel and the silent, crushing depths. On one axis, the American submarine USS Aspro, a ghost in the water. On the other, her unsuspecting target, the Imperial Japanese Navy's submarine, I-43. The course is set, 270 degrees. Speed, a steady 14 knots. The enemy is crossing Aspro's bow at a perfect 90-degree angle, the textbook definition of an opportunity. But the ocean is vast, and distance is a cruel variable. 3,800 yards, too far for a kill to be certain, too far for the men whose lives depend on a single decisive moment. Inside Aspro's hull, the air is thick with anticipation. Commander Harry Stevenson watches the solution unfold. He holds his nerve. The order is given. Maintain course, maintain speed. Close the distance. The hunter stalks its prey, shrinking the gap between them with agonizing patience. The range winds down. 3,500 yards, 3,200. The world for the men of the Aspro shrinks to the numbers on a dial and the view through a thin column of glass and steel. At 2222 hours, the moment arrives. 2,000 yards, 1 nautical mile. Point-blank range in the world of submarine warfare. A shot that cannot be missed. Stevenson raises the periscope for one final, fleeting glimpse. The I-43 fills the lens. A large I-class submarine running on the surface, its bridge fully manned. Lookouts are visible, their silhouettes stark against the night sky. None of them are looking in their direction. They are blind to the predator rising from the depths below. The periscope retracts with a swift hydraulic hiss. The final data floods the torpedo data computer. Bearing. Range. The solution is confirmed. The weapons are ready. Forward, in the torpedo room, 4 tubes stand prepared. Tubes 1 through 4, their outer doors now open to the sea. Each cradles a Mark 14 torpedo. 21 feet of precision-machined steel, weighing over 3,500 pounds. Each carries a warhead packed with 643 pounds of Torpex high explosive, a payload designed to tear the ocean itself apart. 4 torpedoes, enough to cripple a battleship, more than enough to send a submarine to the bottom in pieces. The crew waits. The silence is absolute, a heavy blanket broken only by the hum of machinery and the frantic beating of hearts. 8 hours of relentless pursuit have led to this, an entire hunt condensed into the seconds before the attack. Stevenson's voice cuts through the tension. Fire 1. A slight shudder runs through Aspro's hull, the only sign that a monster has been unleashed. A violent burst of compressed air and the first torpedo is gone, racing towards its destiny at 46 knots. Its gyroscope spins to life, its mechanisms guiding it to a depth of 10 feet. A straight, true run. Fire 2. 3 seconds later, a second steel shark is away. Fire 3. Another 3 seconds, the third weapon is launched. Fire 4. The final torpedo departs, completing the spread. 4 invisible messengers of destruction converging on a single point in the vast Pacific. The estimated time to impact, 90 seconds. There is no time to watch the outcome. The attack is complete. The escape begins. All ahead flank, take her down, 300 feet, hard right rudder. Aspro pitches down, its dive planes biting into the water, turning sharply away from the scene of the crime. The hunter, in an instant, has become the hunted. The submarine descends rapidly toward the safety of the deep, every man inside bracing for the inevitable counterattack, for the rain of depth charge. The torpedoes run on. The 90 seconds stretch into an eternity. Then, at 2223 hours and 43 seconds, the ocean erupts. The first explosion is not merely heard, it is felt. A brutal, physical shockwave that slams into Aspro's hull, a tremor that rattles the very bones of the men inside, even at a depth of 300 feet. The perfect geometry of the attack has been answered with the perfect, chaotic violence of detonation. The invisible line, once drawn in calculation, is now seared into history by fire and water. 1 nautical mile. In the silent, crushing dark of the Pacific, it is an eternity. And yet, it is no distance at all for what comes next. A tremor that travels not through the earth, but through the very medium of existence. A shock wave, invisible and absolute, hurtling through the water to find its target. Inside the USS Aspro, The impact is not a sound, it is a physical violation. A violent, bone-jarring shudder that throws men from their feet. A symphony of chaos erupts in the confined steel tube. The shriek of straining metal, the clatter of loose equipment, the sharp, involuntary gasps of the crew as they cling to anything solid. The first impact. Then, 3 agonizing seconds later, a second, even more devastating blast echoes through their hull. 2 torpedoes, 2 clean hits from a spread of 4, a 50% success rate. It was a lethal calculation performed in absolute darkness, a testament to the crew's deadly precision against a moving target 2,000 yards away. For the Japanese submarine I-43, it was a death sentence. Commander Stevenson's order slices through the tension. Periscope up. A ghost rising from 200 feet, a single eye to the surface world. It is a profound risk, a brief betrayal of their position. But it is necessary. He needs to see. He rotates the optics, sweeping them across the dark, churning water toward the bearing of the attack. And there it is, a spectacle of dying steel. The bow of the I-43, impossibly, is clawing its way out of the ocean, rising at a 60-degree angle, then 70. It is a final, desperate reach for the sky as its stern is pulled down into the abyss. Water, tons of it, pours through the gaping wounds in its forward hull. The torpedo room, the forward battery compartments, all consumed by the cold Pacific. 112 men, trapped in a vertical tomb, are beginning their 2,000-fathom descent. The bow points to the stars for one last moment, a monument to its own demise, before it too slips beneath the waves. A final, silent surrender. The I-43 is gone. The elation of the kill, the grim satisfaction of a mission accomplished, is fleeting. It evaporates in the very next moment. A new sound pierces the silence. The frantic high-speed beat of propellers. Multiple contacts, bearing down from the north, their range closing with terrifying speed. Japanese destroyers. They were either a distant escort for the I-43, or their patrol had been violently interrupted by the sound of the torpedoes. It doesn't matter. They are coming, and they are coming with vengeance. The hunter has become the hunted. The escape begins. All ahead full, hard right rudder. Take her down to 400 feet. The Aspro turns sharply, its nose pitching down, diving deeper than its engineers ever intended. The submarine's rated test depth was 412 feet, the absolute design limit for its pressure hull. To go deeper was to invite structural failure, to risk the ocean crushing them into a metallic coffin. But the alternative, the fury of Japanese depth charges, was a far more certain death. Stevenson chose the pressure. The descent is a steep, controlled fall into blackness. 350 feet, 375, 400. The submarine groans. It is a living sound, the sound of a creature in agony. Every rivet screams under the immense crushing force of the sea. The men are silent, listening to the tortured voice of their ship, praying the structure holds. This is a battle not against another ship, but against physics itself. The Aspro levels off, a fragile bubble of life in a realm of impossible pressure, and races away from the scene of the kill. At 22:30 hours, the first charge explodes. It is not close enough to breach the hull, but it is close enough to feel in their souls. A concussion so violent it feels as if the ocean itself has struck them with a colossal hammer. The impact rings through the ship, a brutal metallic clang that leaves ears ringing and nerves frayed. Then another, and another. The Japanese escorts are not firing blindly. They are dropping their charges in a systematic, sweeping pattern, a cold, geometric search for the American shadow hiding below. They know the area of the attack. They just don't know the Aspro's precise course. The explosions bloom in the distance, close enough to terrify, but for now, too far to kill. Each blast is a reminder of their own fragility, a punctuation mark in the long, dark sentence of their escape. They are running silent, wrapped in the crushing embrace of the deep, which is at once their shield and their potential tomb. In the crushing depths of the Pacific, survival is measured in silence. Aboard the submarine USS Aspro, the world had been reduced to a whisper, silent running, an absolute, suffocating quiet. Electric motors hummed at their lowest possible speed, a phantom pulse in the deep. The propeller turned just enough to give the rudder something to bite, a ghost slipping through the currents. Every non-essential system was dead. No pumps. No machinery beyond what kept them alive. No one spoke. No one moved. Men held their breath, each heartbeat a drumbeat of betrayal. Every sound, a dropped tool, a cough, the metallic groan of the hull under pressure, was a potential death sentence. Because above them, the Japanese escorts were listening. Their hydrophones were ears pressed against the sea, straining for the single vibration that would give away the Aspro's position. Any noise would bring a rain of steel. Silence was life itself. Then another explosion, a dull, gut-wrenching thud that vibrated through the steel hull and into the bones of the crew. The 10th depth charge. The hunters were methodical, laying down a grid of destruction, trying to box them in. But their calculations were based on a ghost. In the 7 minutes since the Aspro had fired its torpedoes, it had vanished. Creeping forward at its maximum quiet speed, the submarine had traveled nearly a nautical mile from the kill zone. The Japanese were hunting a memory. The explosions grew more distant. The shock waves, once violent shudders, became faint tremors. The ocean, which had threatened to be their tomb, was now their shield. The escape was working. At 22:45 hours, the bombing stopped. The sonar operator, his body tense for hours, reported the sound of the escort's propellers fading. The hunters were moving on, chasing shadows in another quadrant of the sea. They had lost the scent. They had lost the Aspro. Still, Commander Stevenson gave no order to relax. Caution was a religion here. For another 15 agonizing minutes, the submarine remained a silent phantom. No premature celebration. No sigh of relief that might be overheard. Only at 2300 hours did sonar give the final confirmation. No contacts. The ocean was empty. The immediate danger had passed. The command cut through the tension. Secure from silent running, all ahead 1/3. The lifeblood of the submarine began to flow again. A low thrum of machinery returned. Come to periscope depth. Let's see what's up there. Slowly, the Aspro began its ascent from the abyss. 400 feet. 300. The pressure gauges wound back. 200 feet. 100. The darkness outside the hull lightened from absolute black to a deep, featureless indigo. 60 feet. Periscope depth. With immense caution, Stevenson raised the search scope. The polished steel cylinder rose with a soft hydraulic hiss. He gripped the handles, pressing his eyes to the optics, and began the sweep. 360 degrees of nothing. Just an endless expanse of dark water under a moonless sky. No ships, no lights. The battleground was deserted. The I-43, the target of their long stalk, was now a permanent resident of the ocean floor. The escorts that had hunted them so relentlessly were gone. The Aspro was alone. Surfaced the boat, The order echoed with finality. Open main vents. Blow all ballast tanks. A roar of compressed air shattered the quiet, forcing seawater from the tanks. The submarine, a leviathan of American steel, shuddered and surged upwards. At 0150 hours, on the morning of February 16, 1944, the USS Aspro broke the surface. She emerged into the vast, silent theater of the Pacific night. Above, a spray of stars glittered in the cold, clear air. The sea was calm. Lookouts scrambled to the bridge, their binoculars sweeping the horizon. Nothing. The ocean was utterly peaceful, as if the preceding 11 hours of cat-and-mouse violence had been a dream. But it was no dream for the 112 Japanese sailors aboard the I-43. The crew emerged onto the deck, breathing in the sharp, salt-laced air, a welcome antidote to the recycled atmosphere below. Diesel engines coughed to life, their deep rumble a declaration of survival as they began to recharge the boat's batteries. An engineering assessment came back. Fuel was at 42%, enough to get them home to Pearl Harbor. 20 torpedoes remained of the 24 they had started with. 4 had been expended. 4 had found their mark. The Aspro had confirmed her first submarine kill of the war. A silent hunter, she had stalked her prey, struck from the depths, and vanished back into the crushing quiet from which she came. The violence was over, for now. The great dark ocean held its peace, and the hunt began anew. The report is drafted in the quiet hum of the wardroom, a world away from the violence that just transpired. The words are clinical, unemotional, a necessary distillation of chaos into order. Crew status, exhausted but uninjured. Submarine status, fully operational. Mission status, successful. On the 15th of February, 1944, at 11:21 hours, destiny appeared as a faint trace on the horizon. A Japanese submarine bearing 320 degrees, range estimated at 20,000 yards. For the commander of the USS Aspro, Harry Clinton Stevenson, the hunt began. A surface pursuit, relentless and unforgiving. 8 hours churning through the Pacific swell at speeds cresting 20 knots. The gap slowly, painstakingly closed. By 2,000 hours, the distance was halved to 10,000 yards. The time had come. The Aspro slipped beneath the waves, transforming from a surface predator into a silent, submerged killer. The approach was a masterclass in patience and geometry, a delicate dance of hydrophones and calculations, maneuvering for the perfect perpendicular strike. At 22:23 hours, the order was given. 4 Mark 14 torpedoes leapt from their tubes, carving invisible paths through the black water. The range, 2,000 yards. Then the confirmation. 2 distinct, shuddering impacts, 2 flashes of light against the dark sea. The target was observed sinking stern first, its bow rising at a steep, defiant angle, a final salute to the sky before surrendering to the abyss. The submarine, assessed as an I-class fleet boat, was gone. Rained down, each one a hammer blow against the ocean, but none closer than 300 yards. The Aspro, deep and silent, endured the storm. By 01:15 hours on the 16th of February, she surfaced to a clear night. The official report concluded with stark simplicity. Continuing patrol. No damage, no casualties. This patrol report would be analyzed by submarine force commanders, its lessons extracted, its doctrine updated, a blueprint for future victories studied by men who had not yet faced their own moment of truth. But the document, for all its precision, omits the true cost. It cannot capture the human dimension of the equation. Aboard the I-43, 112 men had just met their end. For most, death was instantaneous. Each torpedo carried 643 pounds of torpex, 2 direct hits, an explosive force equivalent to 3,000 pounds of TNT detonating against the submarine's fragile pressure hull. The forward section simply ceased to exist. In the torpedo room, a crew of approximately 12 men were vaporized in the first microsecond, unmade before the sound of the explosion could even reach them. In the forward battery compartment, perhaps 8 men died in the next second, as the cold Pacific rushed in, a brutal, unstoppable force. In the crew quarters just beyond, 20 men, sleeping off their watch, were claimed in the first 5 seconds, their bunks becoming their tombs as the compartment flooded completely. For the survivors, a slower, more terrifying end awaited. Perhaps 70 men trapped in the stern sections. Emergency watertight doors slammed shut, a futile act of defiance against the inevitable. The I-43 was sinking rapidly, stern first. The deck tilted to an impossible angle. Men in the engineering spaces and the aft torpedo room scrambled for hatches that led only to more flooding compartments, their world shrinking with every passing moment. They were sealed inside a steel casket, beginning its final, inexorable descent into the crushing darkness, thousands of feet below. One submarine sails on, its tactical victory confirmed and recorded for history. The other lies broken on the ocean floor, a silent monument to that victory, its 112 souls forever encased in the deep. For a few, the fight was not yet over. They clawed their way to the upper decks, emerging from a steel tomb into the suffocating darkness of the open Pacific. They swam clear, watching the silhouette of their submarine vanish beneath the waves. And then there was only the water. Miles from any land, adrift in an immense and hostile blackness. There would be no rescue. The Japanese destroyers would arrive too late. The American submarines, by doctrine, would not stop for survivors. These men, floating in the heart of the enemy's ocean, began a slow, agonizing descent into death. The insidious creep of hypothermia, draining the warmth from their core. The relentless exhaustion, as muscles screamed and then fell silent. The unseen terrors that stirred in the depths below. For hours they suffered, suspended between a world they had lost and a grave that was patiently waiting. Their end came not with the sudden violence of a torpedo, but with the quiet, final surrender of the body. All because they were in the wrong patch of ocean when the submarine Aspro fired its torpedoes. As tradition demanded, I-43's commanding officer remained with his vessel. He stood on the bridge, a solitary figure against the chaos of the sinking. He watched the bow rise one last time, a final salute to the sky. He watched the stern slip under, pulled down by the weight of the sea. Then the water reached the bridge, a cold embrace that swept him from his post. He did not fight it. His body would join the 111 others on their journey into the abyss. The ocean at the point of impact was 12,000 feet deep. The submarine's pressure hull, a marvel of engineering, was rated for a maximum depth of approximately 400 feet. Below that, the vessel was living on borrowed time. Somewhere around 500 feet, the laws of physics rendered their final, brutal judgment. The implosion was not an explosion, but its opposite, a violent, instantaneous erasure. The immense pressure of the ocean collapsed the hull in a fraction of a second, a timescale faster than a human nerve can transmit a signal of pain. For any men still alive inside, death was a mercy. It came without awareness, without suffering. One moment they existed, the next they were gone. 2 miles below the surface, the remnants of I-43 settled into eternal silence. A graveyard of twisted metal, torn equipment, and human remains, scattered across an ocean floor untouched by light. Everything was crushed. Everything was dark. Everything was cold. 3 weeks would pass before a cold, official notice arrived in Japan. The Imperial Navy kept its losses a closely guarded secret, a necessary deception in a war of intelligence. But eventually, the families had to be told. The notification was standard, clinical. Your son, your husband, your brother had died in service to the Emperor and the nation. The cause of death was an operational loss. The location was classified. The remains were not recoverable. There were no details, no explanations, just the unchangeable fact of death. Grief was a private burden. Japanese military culture demanded stoic acceptance. Public mourning was a luxury the war effort could not afford. The widows received a small pension. The children received condolences. The parents received the devastating news that their family line might now end. But nobody received closure. The men were simply gone, swallowed whole by the sea. A world away, sealed within the hull of the submarine Aspro, the mood was one of profound relief. The patrol had been a frustrating ordeal of missed opportunities. Multiple targets detected, but impossible to attack due to heavy escorts or an unfavorable position. Their logbook showed 0 confirmed sinks. But the destruction of I-43 changed everything. It was the confirmed submarine kill that validated the entire patrol, transforming failure into resounding success. The crew's morale surged. They had proven themselves in combat, defeating a dangerous adversary in a fair engagement. Aspro was no longer an untested boat. She was a proven killer, and the crew's confidence in their commanding officer was now forged in steel. One crew celebrated a victory that validated their existence. The other was erased, their final moments scattered across the abyssal plain. The ocean, vast and indifferent, held both stories in its crushing, silent depths. The triumph and the ghost. 8 hours. 8 hours of near-total silence, broken only by the hum of machinery and the steady ping of sonar. 8 hours of stalking a shadow through the deep, a predator locked onto its prey. Inside the steel confines of the USS Aspro, Lieutenant Commander William Stevenson held the fate of 2 crews in his hands. He had pursued his target with an unnerving patience, a relentless, methodical chase across 150 nautical miles of open ocean. Every calculation, every subtle shift in depth and course, was a step in a lethal dance. Then, the moment of truth. The perfect attack position, achieved through skill and instinct. The order given, the torpedoes launched, slicing through the dark water. And then, the confirmation. A series of violent, muffled explosions that resonated through the Aspro's hull. The enemy was gone. In that moment, a bond was forged between commander and crew. A trust, paid for in tension and sealed in victory. It was a currency they would need. The war did not pause for accolades. The patrol continued for another 43 days. The hunters became the hunted. On the 17th of February, Japanese destroyers found them. The same escorts, perhaps, that had lost their charge the night before, now seeking vengeance. 26 depth charges rained down, each detonation a hammer blow against the hull, a violent interrogation of the sea itself. But Stevenson and his crew were masters of evasion. They dove deep, ran silent, and slipped away into the abyss, leaving the enemy to punish an empty ocean. The relentless grind of the Pacific War continued. On the 4th of March, a new contact. A Japanese freighter, traveling alone, a tempting target. 3 torpedoes were fired. 2 found their mark, tearing into the vessel's side. The ship was wounded, crippled, but it did not sink. It limped away toward the safety of port, a partial victory in a war that demanded absolutes. Finally, on the 28th of March, after 72 days at sea, the USS Aspro returned to Pearl Harbor. The mission was complete. 1 enemy submarine confirmed sunk. 1 freighter damaged. The patrol was officially rated a success, or valor in combat. The citation captured the cold facts of the engagement, yet hinted at the immense pressure of the moment. For extraordinary heroism, Lieutenant Commander Stevenson aggressively pursued an enemy submarine for 8 hours, skillfully maneuvered for a perfect attack position, and successfully sank the enemy vessel with accurate torpedo fire. His aggressive leadership and tactical skill reflect great credit upon himself and the United States Naval Service. For his crew, a Presidential Unit citation, a testament to their collective courage and endurance. But the true impact of this one kill echoed far beyond any medal or commendation. It was a strategic blow, a single cut in a war of 1,000 cuts. In early 1944, the Japanese submarine force numbered approximately 60 boats. The loss of the I-43 represented a small fraction of their total strength, a seemingly minor percentage. Yet these losses were cumulative. Across hundreds of engagements, American submarines were waging a slow, methodical exsanguination of an empire's naval power. Each submarine sunk was more than just a loss of steel. It was the loss of an experienced crew that could not be replaced. It was the loss of a reconnaissance platform, an underwater eye that could no longer watch American fleet movements. The I-43 specifically carried a unique asset, a reconnaissance seaplane, an eye in the sky that would now remain blind forever. The intelligence it was meant to gather, the vital information on American carrier forces operating near the crucial base at Truk, was lost to the depths. One less shadow to fear on the horizon, one less threat to vital supply lines. A small tactical advantage, but wars are won on the accumulation of such small advantages. It all began with one commander, one crew, locked in a silent 8-hour duel. An act of profound violence, unseen by the world above. A single, decisive moment, deep beneath the waves, where the fate of battles yet to be fought was quietly, irrevocably sealed. War is a ledger, written in steel and blood. A grim accounting of attrition where victory is measured in subtractions. To this unforgiving sum, the submarine USS Aspro would contribute. 1 submarine, 1 engagement, 1 kill. Far from the violence of the open ocean, in the quiet offices of Japanese naval intelligence, analysts pieced together a ghost story. The subject? Imperial submarine I-43. The conclusion? Lost to an American submarine attack north of the Truk atoll. The location was precise, a cold point on a vast map. 10 degrees 23 minutes north, 150 degrees 23 minutes east. The date, February 15, 1944. The time, a moment frozen forever, approximately 22-23 hours local. There were no survivors to tell the tale, not one. The narrative was reconstructed from the frantic reports of escort ships, from the echoes of chaos. They reported the sudden, violent blooms of torpedo explosions against the hull. They reported the final, horrifying sight of I-43's bow, vertical against the dark water, a steel tombstone plunging into the abyss. They searched for the attacker, for the shadow in the deep, but found nothing. The American submarine had vanished. The analysts in Tokyo drew a chilling lesson. An American boat had stalked its prey from long range, achieved a perfect attack position, and escaped without a trace. The northern approaches to the Empire's great naval base were no longer safe. A fundamental doctrine had to be rewritten. A single, silent hunter had forced the hand of an entire navy. The official record, as always, was devoid of emotion. A clinical entry in a book filled with such losses. Type B-1 submarine, commissioned in 1943 at the Yokosuka Naval Arsenal. Length, 308 feet. Displacement, 2,584 tons surfaced. A crew of 112 souls. Its service record was brutally short. One war patrol prior to its final mission. Sunk February 15, 1944. Cause: American submarine attack. All hands lost. One submarine among a litany of losses. One line item on a casualty list that grew longer with every passing day. An empire was dying at sea, ship by ship, man by man. I-43 was just one more number in that terrible equation. But for the 112 men who died, the war ended that night. At 23 hours, they were sailors. Submarine qualified, trained, experienced. They knew the risks of their silent service, the deadly nature of their craft. They accepted those risks in the name of their emperor, in the performance of their duty. Then, 2 American torpedoes found them in the dark. Most died instantly, the pressure hull collapsing in a fraction of a second. Some died slowly, in the flooding compartments, in the crushing dark. All died completely. The ocean took them all. There would be no burials, no ceremonies, no markers to disturb the silt, just depth and darkness and the immense, unyielding pressure of the sea. This was the reality of submarine warfare, a truth hidden beneath the clean lines of patrol reports. The USS Aspro continued its service. 7 war patrols in total, from 1943 to 1945. Multiple engagements, several confirmed kills. The submarine, and most of its crew, would survive the war. They would return to lives of quiet normalcy. But they would remember I-43, the 8-hour chase, the patient, methodical stalk, the cold perfection of the attack. Combat veterans carry such memories for a lifetime. Some would speak of it. Most would keep silent. All would remember. War is a ledger, and on its pages, the loss of one submarine is balanced against the gain of a tactical advantage. A simple, brutal calculation. One that ignores the silent, permanent cost paid by 112 men in the crushing darkness, miles beneath the waves. In an ocean of impossible blue, the world was a metronome of routine. The steady thrum of diesel engines, the rhythmic ping of sonar sweeping an empty horizon. For the crew of the USS Aspro, it was another day of exercises, another day of rehearsing a war that felt distant, theoretical. Then, a whisper, a distortion in the endless rhythm, a ghost on the hydrophone. This was the day the drill became the kill. The day the patient hunters of the deep found their true prey, a Japanese I-class submarine, the I-43. What began as a training scenario bled into stark reality, across a featureless expanse of the Pacific. The hunt was on. Hours stretched into an eternity as Aspro clawed through the waves, a relentless shadow pursuing another. This was a duel fought with slide rules and instinct, a deadly geometry calculated in the crushing quiet of the control room. And then, the moment of violence. A spread of torpedoes launched into the abyss, a muffled concussion that traveled through water and steel, felt in the bones of every man aboard. Then, a profound silence. The I-43 was gone. The hunters had survived. For the Aspro, that day, February 15, 1944, was a crucible. But it was not the end of its story. When the Great War concluded, the submarine was laid to rest, decommissioned in 1946, a relic of a global emergency now past. For 5 years, it sat silent in the reserve fleet, a ghost of the Pacific War. History, however, had other plans. A new conflict in Korea demanded old warriors. In 1951, Aspro was reborn. Modernized, bristling with updated electronics and weapons, it sailed again, a veteran pressed into the new, quiet struggle of the Cold War. For another 11 years, it prowled the depths, a silent guardian in a world of simmering tension. Its final decommissioning in 1962 was permanent. Struck from the Naval Register, sold for scrap. The steel that had witnessed the fury of combat was broken, melted, and recycled into the mundane objects of a civilian world it had fought to protect. A 32-year life, over. Its adversary, the I-43, met a more absolute fate. It remains where it fell, a permanent scar on the ocean floor. Its position is known: 10 degrees 23 minutes north, 150 degrees 23 minutes east. It rests in 12,000 feet of water, entombed by a pressure that defies imagination. 5,300 pounds on every square inch, a force 360 times the weight of the air we breathe, a power that implodes steel as if it were paper. The wreckage is a scattered field of ghosts, twisted sections of the hull, pieces of equipment, personal effects now just shapes in the silt. The human remains were erased long ago by chemistry and time. It is a grave for 112 sailors. No one visits. No one mourns. There is only the immense, crushing pressure, the absolute cold, and the darkness. Forever. The tactical lessons from that single, violent encounter rippled through the entire submarine force. Commander William Stevenson's patrol report was dissected, analyzed, and absorbed. His decisions became doctrine. The aggressive initial pursuit, despite the extreme range. The willingness to maintain a high-speed chase for hours. The patient, submerged approach, calculating the perfect perpendicular attack. And the immediate, disciplined evasion after the kill. Future commanders were taught these brutal truths. Pursue a high-value target with unrelenting aggression. Maintain contact, no matter the cost, in time or fuel. Position with geometric patience. Strike with lethal precision. Then vanish. These tactics, validated in the cold Pacific that day, were used to sink over 1,000 Japanese merchant ships and nearly 200 warships. Aspro's duel contributed a vital chapter to that unforgiving textbook. The human lessons were more subtle. Submarine warfare demanded a unique psychology. Endless hours of profound boredom, punctuated by seconds of absolute terror. It was a world of routine and readiness, of managing crushing fatigue and the constant gnawing stress of living in a steel tube beneath the waves. The crew of the Aspro mastered this duality. They were patient, and they were violent. One ship lived on, its story becoming a lesson. The other fell silent, its final resting place a memorial. Both were defined by a single day, when the vast, empty ocean became the stage for a perfect, deadly hunt. In the crushing dark, miles beneath the waves, there are no nations. There are only hunters and the hunted. For these silent predators, survival is governed by a trinity of virtues. Patience, the discipline to wait for 8 hours, a day, a week, becoming one with the abyss. Precision, the cold violence of the final attack, a calculation of speed, distance, and physics that ends in a single, irrevocable moment. And die. Never there. Submarines that lacked any one of these did not return to port. Their stories ended abruptly, their steel hulls becoming permanent fixtures on the ocean floor. The USS Aspro, however, possessed all three. It was a vessel honed into a perfect weapon, and its crew moved with the grim efficiency of masters at their craft. They were about to prove it. The target was the Imperial Japanese submarine I-43, another steel shark moving through the same dark hunting grounds, crewed by men who understood the same brutal mathematics of undersea warfare. For 8 hours, Aspro was a shadow, a flicker on a hydrophone, a ghost in the current. A silent ballet of hydrophones and periscopes, of men holding their breath in the stale, recycled air of a steel tube submerged miles from home. Then, the moment of precision. The solution was calculated. The outer doors of the torpedo tubes slid open, flooding with the cold Pacific. With a violent shudder, the steel fish were away, their propellers churning, racing toward a destiny they could not comprehend. For the crew of the Aspro, these were the longest seconds of their lives. An eternity of waiting, listening for the sound that would confirm their kill. And then it came. Not a single boom, but a catastrophic cacophony. The sound of a ruptured hull, of compressed air exploding, of a vessel torn apart from the inside out. I-43 was gone. The mission was a success. The crew of the Aspro felt the cold satisfaction of a job executed to perfection. They had done their duty. During the war, the ethics were ruthlessly simple. Enemy submarines were legitimate targets. Sinking them was a duty, not a crime. Both sides operated under the same unforgiving doctrine: destroy the enemy, avoid detection, and survive to fight another day. There was no room for moral agony in the torpedo room. There was only the target and the imperative to eliminate it. But time has a way of softening the hard edges of duty. Decades later, the war was a memory, a collection of stories told by old men. And for some of the veterans of the Aspro, a new perspective began to emerge. The label enemy had faded with age. What remained was a stark human reality. 112 men died that day. 100 in the same unforgiving ocean. They had died because the crew of the Aspro had done their job with lethal excellence. Was that a thing to celebrate, or a thing to regret? The question lingered in the quiet moments. Most concluded it was simply war. War produces death. They had done their duty, and the dead had done theirs. There was no glory to be found, and no guilt to assign. Only duty and death. The ocean could have just as easily taken them. Luck and skill were the only currencies that mattered. For historians, the encounter is stripped of all emotion. It becomes a case study. A classic example of submarine-versus-submarine combat, analyzed in the sterile environment of war colleges and naval academies. Every element is dissected: the patient pursuit, the careful positioning, the accurate weapons employment, the successful escape. It is preserved not as a tragedy, but as a tactical textbook on how to hunt and kill an equal. One submarine hunted another. One submarine died. One submarine survived. In the end, the only true witness was the ocean itself. It saw the silent chase. It felt the violent conclusion. And in its eternal, silent depths, the ocean keeps its dead. In the crushing dark of the open sea, they were little more than boys, sent out in vessels of wood and steel, impossibly small against the vast, indifferent water. Each mission was a gamble, played with the highest of stakes. a silent, deadly ballet performed in service to a nation at war. Their work was brutal, precise, a scalpel's cut in the heart of a global conflict. The tactics they perfected, born of desperation and sheer genius, would be studied for generations. Their sacrifice, paid in the currency of youth, would echo far beyond the waves. These are the stories that must be told, the chronicles of ordinary men who, in the most dangerous of moments, shaped the course of history.